meeting. It's 11:29. Oh, have we got Janine? Have we got Madam Moneybags? Oh, maybe we should wait. Maybe we should wait for the director of finance. Okay. All right. We will we'll continue on with our Tahuya discussion. This was sort of on the back of a few questions that came out of yesterday's meeting, just wanting to make sure councillors understand what's being asked through the CE submission. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you say, we put together a few slides here to try and address some of the questions that were asked yesterday around the request for Tahuya in the CE submission. So this particular slide here, it just sort of articulates the numbers. So the first column there is what was in the draft annual plan. The second column is what the change request is in the CE submission. And the third one is the total cost of funding, and that articulates the $450,000 that we need to prosecute, I guess, the business cases around Tahuya moving forward. So that's just in terms of the numbers. I'll go over to the next slide and just quickly talk about the Tahuya program. Now, I've just covered. I've also got James Llewellyn online as well, and James is our technical expert who's been working with us on the Tahuya business case. This is a broad outline of the three key projects that we've got for Tahuya. We understand, of course, that this has been spoken about at length at some of our committees, and the request in the pack, the report in the pack, was endorsed by the Future Proof PT subcommittee last Friday for consideration of council. And I think the other point to make before I pass over to James is that we are looking to work as efficiently and effectively as we possibly can in terms of use of in-house resources, but also where we need to, augmenting that with contract resources. But with having said that, James, I'll pass over to you to talk about the program and the breakdown of the business cases on the next slide.
Yeah, cheers, Brian, and kia ora, everyone. So these figures and the scope and task come from what's called a point of entry, which is a document that scheme promoters like Waikato Regional Council conclude with NZTA, who under most circumstances are a co-funder for business cases. So what this table shows is all the tasks that are ultimately required to successfully deliver a business case for Tahuya future improvements. And the main technical tasks are the ones that have numbers shown against them. So these are tasks that require specialist consultancy expertise, which we have to buy in because we don't have that in-house. So starting with the baseline and demand forecasting model, that's really important to understand just how many people could use an improved Tahuya service in the future. We want to see a lot more bums on seats, and those bums paying a fare to travel on Tahuya to contribute to the financial success of the operation. So getting that demand forecasting right and considering all the factors such as population growth, future development, really critical. So that requires specialist expertise to have robust surveys and demand forecasting models. The technical assessments look at things like, well, what level of service frequency would be ideal in terms of existing and new stations. Where do those need to be located? And what's the specification of those stations to maximise the level of benefit to passengers, but also to keep costs under control? And the rolling stock, the most critical aspect is having sufficient numbers of trains to run a service that is actually attractive and frequent for the passenger. Some rolling stock work has already been done, by consultants WSP, and we'd be looking to build on that. And the same actually applies to stations and services. There's already been some business case work done over the last few years, so we're not starting from a blank sheet of paper. If we were, then the costs would be significantly higher than what is being showed here. In terms of the other cost scope items, very, very briefly, wider economic benefits. I mean, this is something that I think is key to the business case. Tahui isn't just about running trains. It is about helping areas of the region to fully realise their economic potential through travel, both within the region, that's both to Hamilton, and also then outside of the region to Auckland. So a key part of the benefits will be what are the wider impacts on the economy that we need to take into consideration. So the benefits don't just accrue to train users or to people who would otherwise travel by train. The other things to think about are how much would all this infrastructure and service cost? So we need some costing in there. And the economic case effectively brings that all together into what's called a benefit to cost ratio, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So those are the tasks that at the moment we would require specialist consultancy resource to undertake. The remaining tasks are essentially summarising all of that technical information into a business case document. And in principle, those can all be delivered in-house, but that is subject to having sufficient staff to do that role. So that's just a very, very brief summary, and obviously happy to take any questions on the detail. Thank you.
Councillor Cookson and then Councillor Hughes. Councillor Cookson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In that business case, will it give the opportunity of outer regions being able to have connecting facilities back to Hamilton? So Coromandel and the Hauraki Plains have really struggled with bus services getting into the city. So their connectivity would actually be easier if the train runs in the future, to have a connecting service for those outer areas to be connected through Tikawata or Pocono to get services to Hamilton. So will that be a part of the business case, or just?
Through the chair, so this is something we could certainly look at, because as you rightly say, access to stations, particularly from rural areas, is really important. And the location for a potential new station at somewhere like Pocono is quite significant, because it does also bring in the option of park and ride, because that station is located at the intersection of State Highways 1 and 2. So whether it's people driving or whether there are bus services connected into that particular location, that strikes us as being one good opportunity. So yeah, access to stations and how that's achieved is going to be part of the business case, because we need people to use the stations and the services. That's absolutely clear. So we need to find ways of ensuring that that is done.
Yeah, I don't know if that really answered it, but.
All right. I've got Councillor Hughes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Question, to try and answer it. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 banks there, planned in-house delivery. Now, I assume we haven't got people sitting around with nothing at the moment. So, somebody explain what the cost of employing people on those spots, so we can add that to the 450.
Through the chair, I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask that, because I'm a technical consultant, so I don't know whether Brian Sherritt would be able to discuss that. I mean, my view is that yes, you do need specialist people in-house to do that, and that's something that would have to be looked at, but I can't comment on the current resource situation, I'm afraid.
So through the chair, we have been going through a piece of work at the moment, looking at what our resources are for the next financial year, to make sure that we're utilising our in-house resources as best we possibly can. I take the point, though, from Councillor Hughes that is actually a cost, and it's a staff cost that we would have incurred anyway, and we haven't included it in that particular summation there. What this table is about is the the contracted services, I suppose, cost for those sections or elements of the business casing work that we'd be looking to do. So yes, what we're trying to get here is the best utilisation of internal resource and external resource to get the very best information on the table for a decision around Tahuya into the future.
There's two parts to my question, thanks, Brian. First one was, do we have the resource sitting around at the moment to be able to fill in those spots? If we don't, then we're going to have to employ them, which means we're going to incur additional cost. If we do, the cost of having their employment should be added to the 450.
Yeah. So I would, staff are not sitting around with nothing to do. That just to be let's tell that.
Yes.
So that's what I was trying to say before. We are trying to plan for the best use of the internal resources that we have, and augmenting that with external expertise where we need to. So that's the plan that I've been working very hard on.
So what I'd like to see then is what the cost of those people will be to be added into that plan, which will add to the total. Is that clear or not?
I think it's, I understand the request from the councillor, and I think we could do that because he's looking at this from Councillor Hughes is looking at from the perspective, what's the total cost of having to put business cases together so we can put something to the NZTA board, as opposed to what I think you're trying to suggest, what the external cost of doing it. I think that was your purpose for the presentation.
That's correct, yes.
Thanks.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Yes, thank you. I've got a number of questions. Could we go back 2 slides? One. Can you explain the general rate gone from 60 to 240 to 300? What is the general rate in that case?
So that's the increase that we're looking for. This is my understanding how that table works. I don't know whether that makes sense to you.
Yeah, so through the chair, in terms of in the draft annual plan, effectively the general rate is the funding mechanism outside of what subsidies available from NZTA. So in the draft annual plan, we'd assumed costs of 200, 140 of that coming in from NZTA, which will be 70% of the cost, and then the general rate being the difference between that. So in the absence of the NZTA subsidy, because they will not fund this, and in light of the increased cost to develop the business case, there's a further $240,000 of general rate funding that has been requested through the CE submission process. That's included in all of the numbers that we've presented to you.
In addition to the carryover of 150?
Correct. So the forecast numbers that we showed you will be assuming that carryover has taken place. I made that comment that if carryovers weren't in there, that the surplus would have been bigger.
Second question, going from 200 to 450, what are we getting extra why were you planning on 200 and why is it now 450? What are the additional things that are happening?
So through the chair, I can probably answer this one if that's okay. So we've been doing some more work on the long-term service configurations, and also things like rolling stock specifications and stations. And in our view, we're a lot clearer now on the types of interventions that are going to be needed to be considered in this business case than we probably were when the LTP was written. So, my job has been to effectively put together, what I think as a business case practitioner is what we need to do based on current knowledge. So, that's why the increase has taken place. And it is worth it pointing out that business cases can be very, very expensive, and I'm talking in the millions of dollars. I used to work for NZTA where that was often the case. So hopefully I can provide some reassurance that we haven't in any way tried to over-egg this, and we're doing the basics using the existing work we've already done to get to a stage where we can have something that's really value for money.
Number three, when is this business case proposed to be completed?
So through the chair, ideally by end of June, I think it is next year. We want to be in a position where for the next regional land transport plan, and ultimately national land transport programme, we are in a position where we may be able to make a bid for further funding, depending on what the business case concludes. And that's really the key to this all is, what does the business case say is the best value for money solution?
Fine. And finally,
sorry, Councillor, can I just, James, would you be able to just, if we flick to the next slide, we didn't really touch on it in your presentation, but those 3 streams of work which have the dates on them there, that I think would help broaden the question that councillors asked there around this work in the context of the other pieces of work that we're doing?
Yeah, sure, that's absolutely fine. So yeah, project 1, that is effectively the work we need to do to secure Te Huia's future in the interim. So this is effectively what do we need to do post end of trial June 2026 to keep the existing service going. So in essence, that means writing an end of trial review report to NZTA, and then to make the case for continuing that funding at basically at the current total level for the foreseeable future. So that's separate but related to the business case we are talking about, which is actually under item 3. So that's also very important to make clear. This is what other things need to happen for Te Huia to become a permanent service and a value for money permanent service in the longer term. So all these 3 projects are very much related, and it's about trying to understand and build on what we've got. We know that service frequencies, when they have improved, have led to more people using the services. And our intention is to ask the question, well, if we took the service level to, let's say, hourly, for the sake of argument, what would that do to the costs and the benefits? Would it actually be worth doing? That's really what the business case is trying to establish. So all of these 3 projects essentially are interlinked and enable us to move forward with some confidence.
just clarifying, the 450,000 is for project 3 alone, or for projects 1, 2, and 3?
It's really for projects 1 and 3. So the demand forecasting, for example, that can be used for both projects 1 and 3. The rest of the business case funding, that's really looking more at project 3, but it's all interlinked. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is get the best possible evidence that we can deliver benefits to the people for a reasonable and sensible cost.
And so project 2, initial discussion with the NZTA board and final decision March 2026. So if the NZTA board decides in March 2026 they're not going to co-fund Te Huia, do the other business cases, are they completed by that stage?
No, they would still be in preparation. So the board decision would need to be no later than March 2026, because if the service was to finish at the end of the trial period, then there'd need to be a 3-month stand down period.
And are we likely to get an indicative outline from NZTA prior to March 2026?
I think it's the intent that once we've produced our first draft end of trial report, we will be sharing that with NZTA, and we'll be doing our best to get indications about what the future might be. Now, ultimately, what we can't do is prejudge any board decision, and it is ultimately the board's decision as to the future of Te Huia. But rest assured, we'll be working very closely with NZTA officials to understand and try and read the tea leaves as best we can about what the future might look like, and we're doing that all the time because we recognise the risks and uncertainties as the trial period comes to an end, and we're trying to do what we can to mitigate those.
And finally, our long-term plan has indicated if the government doesn't co-fund this, we wouldn't be proceeding with Te Huia.
Correct.
Well, I think, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I mean, essentially, we need funding from a variety of sources, and it can't all fall on WRC.
Thank you.
If I could just make a comment here. So the next council will obviously need to make the decision about whether they're going to fund Waikato ratepayers' money, a future Te Huia. However, it's not possible to make that decision until we have the board decision, obviously. To be able to get the board decision, what we're doing here is saying to put the best foot forward to the NZTA to be able so they can make an informed decision. There's a certain amount of work we have to do, and this is the investment that's needed to put the best foot forward. I think the thing that's important is not, in my mind, it's not this council's decision on whether Te Huia should have a future or not. It's the next council. But this is about being able to put the case to the NZTA board so they can make that determination. I think that if the NZTA board were not to make any funding, the next council needs to make that decision. I don't think the previous LTP could preempt that. Have I got that right, Janine?
That was a yes. Yep. And this is the best affordable foot forward, right? This is, I mean, we could invest a whole lot more into a much more robust and detailed business case. But what you're proposing through these figures is a reasonable level of investment that is going to get us the right information to put in front of not only the NZTA board, but also the next council. Yep.
That's correct. Yep.
Great. All right. I've got Councillor Strange, Smith, Marr, and Mahuta. Councillor, you don't need that. Councillor Strange.
Yeah, I wonder if I might wait till people have had their questions.
Councillor Marr, sorry.
Thank you. Couple of questions. The 150 carryover, that's out of the surplus rates. That's not out of a Te Huia surplus.
It's the Te Huia
so-
Reserve Fund, isn't it?
So through the chair, that's included in the current year forecast, which it will be general rate funding that is included in that surplus position that we gave you a heads up on.
General rate surplus, not
Yep.
the Te Huia surplus that
Correct.
was
So all
spoken
of
about and
this,
used for the trial extension.
all of this is assumed to be funded through the general rate.
Thank you. And my other question is, so in the long-term plan, we included 200,000 in this for this business case end of trial. It's gone up to 50. So should our figure only be that extra 250? Bring it up to the 450 if we've already included in the long-term plan 200,000?
So perhaps if we can go back to that budget slide, which shows effectively the additional investment that's being sought is 240,000 in essence through the increase in the general rate.
Okay, so it is only the 250. Yeah, so it's not 450.
Yep, no, because of that, and it is an assumption. Obviously, it hasn't been through a council decision-making process, but that carryover funding from the current year to support this work as well, but it's not new money.
Thank you.
Councillor Mahuta.
Just checking on where we will be as a result of the work being done in the future. Given that future proof from our council and the Southern Links from Auckland say the amount of growth that's going to happen in the corridor, and those numbers prop up the transport option. I'm wondering though, if we're so captured in the provision of public transport, we forget that there may be private investors that want to buy that. So can it be written for both purposes or read for both purposes, the product at the other end is what I want to know. Like if I had an infrastructure investment I wanted to make, could I read this report that we're going to do and see the value in it for my enterprise, for example? Because if it's only public good, they're the only people we're shopping with. I'm just asking for a friend, for myself, really.
Yeah,
So
through the sorry,
Go,
Phil.
James. Go on, you
Oh,
carry on.
Through the chair. Yes, the business case is really focused on understanding what are the third-party funding contributions that could be leveraged in to make the service more viable. So we're very much taking a view that this shouldn't just be ratepayer or taxpayer funding only. We're really keen to understand and work with the government who have put forward various ideas for third party and private funding contributions through the government policy statement on land transport. So the financial and commercial cases of the business case, which are highlighted on the next slide, are really key to all of that, to work out what that contribution could be. So land value capture is a good example of where, if there is a faster and more frequent service for Te Huia, there are additional stations that could lead to significant increases in land value around those stations, and a proportion of that could be captured to fund the infrastructure to make it all happen. That's just one example. So we're really keen to look at a wide variety of funding sources and not just the usual ones.
I may just add to that to highlight that there's a blurred line between the work we're doing here on a rail service and those much wider, broader, larger conversations, and the role of future-proof, the regional deals, conversations, UNISA are all, and the role of each of the districts along the route are all parts of that future. And there's a point where the resources we have won't stretch that far. So this is being developed to encourage and enable that wider conversation.
Councillor Hughes. Microphone.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I'm sorry to go back to this issue that I raised, but we're talking about 450. That's not the cost. If we have to employ more staff, then we need to get them included in there. I'd like somebody to try and give us an answer for this. I don't know. You know, have we quantified the people that are going to be required to be employed to fill in those gaps?
So across the directorate, we don't have any additional headcount included in any budget. So the work that is identified as being staff will be led within existing resource. We can cost that as a percentage of the time that would be allocated to those people, but we don't have we don't have the headroom to enlarge in the organisation to cater to this work. So we can certainly give you a cost, but there won't be new staff as a result.
So what you're saying, Phil, you've got the resource presently employed to fill in those gaps. So we're not going to have an additional cost or an extra FTE or 2 or 3.
Yes, I mean the work will be on top of existing full-time roles, but we think we can achieve it within what we have, because we don't have space to make the team larger to accommodate this work.
I don't know whether I'm asking the question correctly or not. I really want to know, is it 450,000 or is it 450 plus some additional staff? That the cost of delivering these reports will be borne by the ratepayers? And if so, how much?
There are no new staff.
Okay, thank you.
I've got Councillor Nicholl and Councillor Strange.
Okay.
Who wants?
I'll
Councillor
go
Nicholl.
brief. I'll be brief. Just thank you to the staff for working through all the various questions. I think you've answered it quite clearly. And ultimately, this is the responsible thing to do, to evaluate the trial, to look at what comes next, and give the next council the best foot forward to be able to make those decisions. This is in context of all the
90 odd million to set this up many years ago. The OPEX or the operational expenditure and the rates of the last 4.5 years, and the positive experiences that their 99% satisfaction rating has. So in context of all of that, this, what sounds like a moderate approach to put the best foot forward sounds really sensible, so that NZTA can make some decisions that will guide the next council. Thank you for your work, and I recognise your team is quite stretched, has a lot going on, and these things are not simple, hence we have clever people like James helping out. And so I just wish you all the very best with going forward with this to allow the next stage to be evaluated and go forth. Thank you.
I'm reflecting on our previous conversation on the R&D, and I was getting a very clear steer from councillors as we went around as to whether or not it was supported. Just picking up on your points, what we're talking about here is instead of 250 in the next annual plan, we're talking about 400,000 to determine the future of something we have already invested considerable funding into, that people have made decisions on where they have purchased their house because this service is currently in place. So just some context, because I'm not getting a very clear steer from people as to where they're sitting on this. Councillor Strange.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the report and the added information today as well. Just wanted to drill down a little bit into the NZTA lack of co-funding. Can you just give us a bit more information? I know there's been messages about they won't fund it this time versus they won't fund it all. Can you just clarify, if we were to, say, instruct you to work your magic with NZTA to see if we could get any co-funding for this business case, seeing that it is a requirement of the 5-year trial that we complete the business case? Just seems a little bit odd that, you know, the whole process of getting it established, the investment from numerous partners. The 2-year review was brilliant. Public, through any way possible, tell us that it has changed their lives, and just that future possibilities of what it could be as well. So yeah, just wondering if there is any anything that as staff you could do through your channels to massage NZTA once that process maybe of the RONs is played out, and how that might change our funding projections.
So yes, I mentioned yesterday that the agency is withholding decision making on a whole stream of initiatives as it builds up to the decisions around roads of national significance. The program that we've shown on this slide has been developed with NZTA staff, and James mentioned in his presentation the point of entry process that we've entered into, which is where we get their support in principle to continue in this direction. It has been as part of that process that they, at a staff level, have declined the funding that would help us with this work. At which point we added it to the CE submission so that we could have this conversation. We obviously will continue to advocate for there to be a fair proportion of these costs funded by the Crown, consistent with all of the other work that happens nationally. But we'd certainly welcome your support with that. If there's a way that we can activate discussions at a political level or high level, that would really help our case. It is very unusual that we continue to be asked to fund pieces of work without Crown support. I don't believe that's happening elsewhere. It seems surprising that the Tahuia project as a whole is so much harder than everything else that goes on. I'd really like it to be treated fairly and consistently with everything else that we co-fund with NZTA.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm sure, yeah, we'll do what we can within our power. Not that we've got much. That's fine. And just wanted to flesh out a little bit the long-term future options. I know that quite a bit of the perhaps hesitation and aversion to taking risks around the rolling stock and just the big numbers that presents. Could you just maybe add some flesh to those long-term future options around around the rolling stock in particular? I know we've heard about different partner funding opportunities with value capture and what stations could enable in regards to people investing in those areas with transit-oriented development. But yeah, just around the rolling stock, and we don't have to be the ones that own it, is something that this business case could look at the options of rolling stock ownership, etc.
Yeah, through the chair, I can have a go at answering this one. So the rolling stock business case work we've done to date is based on replacing the current 1970s carriages and locos at the same service frequency that we currently have. So that business case concluded we would need 3 units of rolling stock to replace the service on a like-for-like basis. The challenge we've got is that if we did want to increase the service frequency, we would need more trains to do that. And the challenge is that if we only ordered 3 trains now and then subsequently decided we wanted more trains, that's likely to result in significantly increased costs compared to a scenario where we would order the optimal number of trains in the first place. And the more trains you order, the better price per train you get. So that's kind of the dilemma we're in at the moment. And this is why it is important to do this work now, so we get a definitive view one way or the other on the number of trains we will need in the future, and we don't keep flipping and flopping between different numbers. Now, in terms of your point about rolling stock ownership, there are lots of models out there that can be implemented, and they don't all involve the public sector or WRC directly owning rolling stock. So in the UK, for example, where I come from, rolling stock is generally leased by third-party companies, and there are other options too in terms of how that rolling stock is not only owned, but also who maintains and operates it. So in answer to your question, the business case will look at all of those options. It won't just assume that either WRC or another public sector organisation will own it.
And maybe just the piece to add to that is the funding that was put into the 2024 to 2034 long-term plan was based on a 10% contribution with a 90% Crown contribution based on a traditional model of ownership. But that represents one case. That this work will reconfirm all of that and will allow the next LTP conversation about that decision that was made to be reassessed with that additional technical input and time.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it's look forward to seeing what comes out of the long-term future options and allowing the next council to make those informed decisions as well. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
I suppose that this also, if we choose to make this investment, it does allow us to follow through on expectations that have been created through discussions in particularly the Future Proof Public Transport Subcommittee, where we have seen significant levels of support from our TA partners, namely through from Hamilton City Council and Waikato District Council. So a note of that. Councillor Marr.
Thank you. And this, apologies if this was covered yesterday, but just noting in the SEAS report on around point 21 and the national ticketing, and we found 600,000 per hour extra share of it out of the transport reserve. What's the transport reserve, and could any of that be applied to this?
So that's from the targeted PT rate. Policy development work is, as Janine has said, usually funded by the general rate for us. National ticketing relates to a project related to that activity, which is why the reserve has been the appropriate funding source for that work. That's not, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Janine.
Through the chair, I just note that that's really a timing matter as well as opposed to new funding. So it's just the bringing forward of how that ticketing system was planned to be funded anyway, but we are talking targeted rates.
So there's no ability to use any of that reserve and for this?
No.
Through our policies? No.
No. It's been collected, the reserve that is being utilised for the ticketing system is from that Hamilton public transport targeted rate.
Just very briefly, seeing rolling stock's been raised, could you just clarify what the current estimate of the rolling stock is and when it was going to be 2029, was it?
Trying to remember the numbers that are in the long-term plan. I think we at the time had an estimate of around 150 million, I believe. The work we've done since the long-term plan, the detailed business case that James has referred to, has recommended that the most appropriate source of those carriages would be the NIRIM order that's currently going through in the Lower North Island. So an adaptation to platform, carriage height and power supply would enable us to procure carriages more cheaply than that. However, some of the detailed business case work did talk about the need to adjust things like the depot system to account for those new rolling stock items. So it's less than the money that's in the long-term plan on a straight replacement basis for 3 units. But as James has mentioned, if we were to proceed with more of a service pattern, then you would absolutely need more rolling stock. So those numbers are all kind of up and down, left and right.
Approximately 150 million given inflation and
that's what's in the long-term plan.
Like that, and
broadly.
That doesn't include additional stations.
No, though that's a rolling stock statement. Yeah.
All right, I am going to do a straw poll on this because people are not giving me a clear steer on this. So can I get hands up if you support this Tahuya funding proposal that's being discussed? Hands up. And I've got online, I have Councillor Downard, Councillor Hodge, and Councillor Graff. Can I get I assume, Mikhail, that hand up meant yes, you would support it? All right. Right. Okay, thank you for that. And Katarina, I see your hand as well. Thank you.
Not supporting at this stage, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Graff. All right, so we next we're going to thank you very much for that. Thank you, James, for coming online. Much appreciated.
Kia ora. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
We've got the remuneration. Any discussion on this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My request would be just that you consider it. In any topping up would, as discussions at CERC, would enable us to close the gap to market from where overall and general staff are positioned in range, to be able to get closer to the market, and would also enable us to have more funding for performance pay to recognise those who do go over and above in terms of their roles, and including the union commitments for where people are positioned in range, and we need to move forward. Janine, it's a late request that I've put in, seeing that that there was some residual funding from where the previous signalled council position was in the draft annual plan. Is there anything else in that REM space that's of relevance?
In the REM space, I don't think so. I guess it is, the request for council consideration of some more in there.
If council were of mind to put in, $250,000, it would be greatly appreciated by staff.
Yeah, and I think that's probably part of where there are some other moving parts that obviously have been talked about, and maybe in relation to prior year surplus versus the CE submission. For example, the funding of the energy strategy, should that be through rates in the CE submission, or could it be through prior year surplus? So there's some interdependencies between some of these conversations and a final budget position.
Can we just have some clarity about what we're talking about here, this 268,000? As I understand it, the government's analysis of wage rises is coming at 3.9 instead of 3.7. Is that correct?
I'd have to look to Stu for that.
It's not government.
Can I get?
Yep, can you hear me now? Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, that's correct. And to close our position to the market would take 3.7%, but that would leave a very small amount for performance increases and for us to be able to progress people through their position in range. And we have obligations, obviously, with our union agreements, to progress people through that within certain set timeframes. And also with the new model that we run, providing the market increase as of 1st of July and separating out the performance increase, it's quite evident then, when our good performers receive that it is a very small amount. And so I guess Chris is asking for a little bit more to enable us to continue to close that market gap, which we have been doing a great job of in recent years, which is really good to see, and also allow us to continue to provide additional funds for people that perform well.
I'm just confused. The difference between 3.7 and 3.9, is that coming out of the 268,000?
So through the chair, if I can help. So within our baseline annual plan budget, we have included increase in remuneration of 3.9%, but that's to address both market and performance. So what we're seeing is that the market performance is 3.7, which gives us really nothing left in terms of headroom for performance element. So given that the Chief Executive's submission is currently reflecting a reduction in the rates revenue requirement, the Chief Executive is asking consideration of that gap to provide some additional funding for remuneration. So it's the budget provision at 3.9 versus the market at 3.7 of those two different numbers.
So to clarify, so the budget provision was to provide more at 3.9 and we're actually ended up at 3.7.
So 3.7 in market, whereas the 3.9 is market and performance.
Right.
Yeah. So we haven't, so there is very little funding available to recognise performance. If we weight the distribution to performance, then we will lag the market more substantially than we are.
So you're actually general run of staff will get 3.7 and you're asking for 268,000 for those who are higher performing above. Is that the amount? I'm just surprised we don't have a slide on this. It's confusing.
So as I said, I threw it in late. And so there's two things. And I know people who've been sitting around CERC will understand it more because they've had some more discussion and information on it. The position and range is at an average of about 98% or so. We're not at market. We don't have everybody at 100% in their position and range. To be able to move people to where they probably ought to be, as well as to recognise those who have performed well, as well as to meet the market movement, 3.9% wouldn't do it all. And so that is what I've requested. And I don't think 200 and something thousand would do it either, but I'm saying it would go some way to help trying to close that gap.
I'm still confused, but somebody else might have a.
So Nicole.
Thank you. I understand what you're saying, Chris. Provision to be made to use up to that amount at your discretion, obviously, because it all kind of links back to you. And it's in context of everything you've said, and we know else that we also have the organisational changes happening separately. Yeah, to me, it seems that this is a vote that kind of comes down to a trust in you as the CE to you spend that wisely. And so I'm go back to my thanks to the ELT at the start of the day about all the efficiencies that you have found recently to be able to enable all of this. So that's certainly something I'll be considering. Thank you.
All right. Anything else on this? No.
Everyone else understands it then?
So oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just responding to Ben. Yeah, I think people who've been on CERC do, and I accept that it's not straightforward, but actually I heard it at CERC and I support it.
From my perspective, it's about how do we ensure we're meeting the market so that people still want to work here, and how do we provide envelope to recognize our star performers so that they stay working here as well. And so the request I'm hearing is a recognition that the market has moved a bit. And so we want to make sure that we've got the envelope in front of us to recognize our star performers. That's what I'm hearing. Councillor Marr.
Yeah, just following up on Ben's point and noting that not everyone attends CERC. Are we going to have a slide on this or try to come? So it's just black and white and clear.
Yeah, so we can try and pull something together over the lunch break, maybe just to set that out for you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. And then the last thing I want to cover is this conversation around the prior year surplus. Because I think the slide you're talking about, Councillor Marr, there might be things that get funded out of the prior year surplus or not funded out of the prior year surplus, or there's a bit of fitting of puzzle pieces together that might take a little bit of time to do that. And so I want to get this subject out on the table so that if there's new puzzle pieces identified, we understand them. All right. Does anyone want to, I'm looking to you, Chris, or you, Janine, around the prior year surplus before I open it up to councillors? Anything you wanted to say?
The only thing I'd say is just to remind you that in a previous council meeting at the at the draft annual plan stage, you did have some discussion about whether you'd like to return that to ratepayers or not. In the past, our advice, the staff advice, has always been that if there's prior year surplus, it's useful to retain it for one-off things that come along. And it's been useful in that context. And I think, Janine, that's continue to be the staff advice.
Great. And I think just further to that, in February, we had quite a conversation in terms of the impact this year or for the 25-26 annual plan process of any release of the prior year surplus to provide rates relief, with the consequence of that in the next annual plan process as well. So we covered that in an earlier conversation of anything that you reduce this year, you are going to have to fill that gap through increased rates in the next financial year. So, but we can support with some modelling on that.
I've got Councillor Smith first, and then Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Thank you. Some of us have our independent networks and send out regular newsletters or whatever, and they are disseminated further. So when we decided what we were going to propose, I sent my regular one out, and without fail, all the feedback that came to me directly, and it's not reflected in the submissions because I was asking them to tell me what they thought, is that the community wants us to retain that to deal with one-off scenarios that does not impact on ongoing rates. They did not want it to be put into the rates and therefore having to pay more next year. They would like us to pay as we go, but if the opportunity arises and things come up, which is what council has done previously, I was absolutely surprised that there was no one saying, give it to us in our rates. I thought certain people would say that, but they didn't. And so I am guided by my constituents who are telling me to retain it as the status quo. Thank you.
I would concur, Councillor Smith. That's certainly what I have heard, as we have the same constituents, and they were consistent. They were consistent in their view, that's for sure. And if I recall, we only had 2 submissions on this matter, and both of them said retain the surplus. Just drawing people's attention to that. Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just note there that we've got a doubling up on the establishment of the Research and Development Fund at 250,000, given we've already talked about 250,000 for our Research and Development Fund.
So through the chair, can I clarify, and it's set out in the CE submission around the concept of the establishment of that R&D Opportunities Fund. Then if a particular project should proceed and additional funding from council is required, that's that 250,000 there. So they are separate. An opportunity on the table, or an opportunity, sorry, it's not on the table, that's being looked at and talked about would have a council contribution of 500,000. So hence the 2 lots of 250. They are separate. So you've indicated support for one side, not necessarily for this bit.
And in terms of rates reduction, if we assumed that those 3 bottom items were covered, how much would be left that could go towards rates reduction?
So if all of the recommendations or identified potential drawdowns were approved, there's just shy of 2.7 million remaining unallocated.
Right, so that's a 2% rate increase.
I don't believe
almost, yeah. Noting a 2% increase then the following year.
All right. I've got Councillor Mahuta, then Councillor Hughes. Councillor Mahuta.
Janine, I've been part of council where we have done this out, but we've smoothed it out and seen the future impact on rates. So I'm just wondering if that might help some other councillors. But as we go into the next quorum of council, I'm trying to figure out what information may a new member not have. So I would like to consider that in our funding policy, it does report on how often we've done this, how much we've overshot, because we do it all the time. It's part of, I've accepted that as part of our council accounting. We over budget, we end up with a surplus, then we plan to spend it because that's what's been the practice. If that's not in fact the case, we've done it every sitting that I've sat here. So I want to know what's discipline around that for the future. Don't need it around this one because it is a practice of council. And I'm not saying anything shoddy about how we number things up. I'm just saying that in the process, I'm not sure where we start capturing those costs, limiting or setting expectations that any surplus that exceeds X amount will be returned. You know, some policy caveats so that we stay within great management, but also provide opportunity and flexibility to ourselves. I just think we've got all the flex and none of the discipline sometimes, because this happens every AP and LTP. And it happens everywhere in local government too, but it's just hard to keep it in the accountable space.
Yeah, through the chair, I think I'd just recognise that the surplus that we achieved in the last financial year was
an anomaly, wasn't
quite an
it?
anomaly to where we would normally be performing. Typically, we actually run reasonably close to our budget, typically slightly on the favourable side, but not to the extent that we saw in the last financial year. So that has driven, I guess, some of the discipline that we've been trying to work on through this last quarter forecast with ELT of going, how good is that forecast? Because that's where we need to get the signals of how we're going, is actually through that feedback loop. And so that has been stress tested to make sure, you know, is it a good forecast? As far as I can see, it's you know, pretty robust. So we do try and take those learnings as well in terms of our process.
Just microphone. And
it can seem excessive, that's all.
And to your point, Councillor Mahuta, so this is an anomaly, as I recall, and it was discussed at finance around the discipline on this, which has led to, as Janine is saying, a finer eye of ELT on the forecasting. So
and adjustments built into the baseline annual plan, where that's appropriate.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Tipper raised some very good points, and I'd like to pick up on those. And this is an anomaly, and I think that's clearly demonstrated by this year. I think we've got 675 projected at this stage, but still got a couple of months to go. So that's still to be proven, but that's more the norm than this particular one-off. And that's why I believe we should be giving as much of it back to our council, back to our ratepayers as we can, because it's not our money, it is their money that's been collected, and sure, it didn't all come from them, but largely it did, and it would mean a 2% roughly reduction in rates, which is meaningful. I know, gee, it says it's only $1.90 per $100,000, but it's still meaningful to people. And I think we need to recognise that fact. Just picking up on Tipper's point, I think it's a very good idea to set a policy which says anything below $1 million or whatever the figure is determined by council goes into the reserve fund. Anything over that is maybe debated, but we should be erring on, and as a policy, money goes back to the ratepayers by reduction. Now, you argue that that's going to create problems for the next council, and I accept that is the case, but it also brings discipline to the councillors that are there and the executive leadership team and the chief executive to put the pressure on, the tension on, keep the tension on costs, to deliver a rate increase in the next annual plan, which is wearable and not a blowout situation reflecting just the 2% discount is given to people this year. That's my view, so I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Councillor Marr.
Thank you. I've spoken to a number of groups around my region too, being residents and ratepayers, two of them, and a grey power group, and they all articulated that they'd like it back. One group I did talk to, though, they want to spend some money on removing mangroves, so possibly out of scope. But anyway, noting that this is possibly a one-off, but we are heading for a surplus again this year. We'll see where that ends up in the final quarter. But so I am of the opinion that this particular amount should go back to the ratepayers, and that's supporting. Thank you.
Sorry, what amount? Whatever's left over.
Well, yeah, 4495.
That was 2.7.
It's 2.7.
Well,
2.7.
Yeah, let me rephrase that. Yeah, the 2.7 that after the other items have been taken out.
Councillor Nicol.
Thanks. Yeah, so just building on Tipper and Chris's point, I don't think we should go as far as constraining a cap, get perverse outcomes perhaps, but I have a long time ago now been to finance and services meetings, and you're obviously keeping an eye on this quarterly. However, what could be really helpful is to show these anomalies in context with perhaps a longer trend to the past of what's normal and what's normal, because for us as councillors coming in, it takes a while in your first year to get used to what's normal, and these trends have been very helpful in things like health and safety and others. That will just allow people to get up to speed quicker on what's normal or not. I do think it's a feature of local government where we are forced by legislation to match fund so many things that we often have the match funding not come through, and hence we put our best foot forward. But I accept the fact that this happens because of the way we are set up with central government relationship. Having a surplus is an administrative accounting feature because we choose to do accounting in that way. And hence keeping an eye on it in general so the discipline conversations can be had. As has been flagged, it's been increasing anyway. I do support sticking with the one-off strategic investments approach that has served us in the past. I just don't think that saving the $8, $12 or even $20 this year only to have it hit next year is serving a lot or many well. I think it makes it harder to explain to our community why every dollar is part of each year. And so I think for simplicity's sake, for agility's sake, and all that other stuff, that's why I'll be voting for keeping the way that we've always done it. I was really surprised that we didn't get more feedback on this topic, considering. It could have gone either way. It could have been give it all back, and it could have been here are all my cool projects, I want you to spend it. And we just got neither, I suppose. And so that was an interesting experiment from us. So that's where I'm sitting.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I'm a little concerned about the talk of policy that if so much is left over, we throw it back to the community. Because I have seen and elsewhere perverse behaviours such as spend ups towards the end of the financial year to ensure they come within the parameters. I think that's enough said on that subject.
We're not debating that policy today.
I think, like I've had to do today, I didn't agree with one or two of the earlier decisions, but it is the decision of this council, and we've got to respect the fact that the community has put us here to make the decisions, and they trust us. And sometimes they tell us we've got it wrong, but the reality is we're the ones that have got to act judicially and do it in a responsible way. So I think we've got to come back to the council of the day, ensuring that they do the best for the community. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hughes, did you have one more thing to say?
I was really.
As in I said, one more thing.
Can I just respond to Councillor Nichols' comments? That
Yes, certainly.
I thought you might.
Nichols appears to have a new set of accounting policies, which I'd like to understand.
No new policies, just features that I'm observing.
All right. With that, councillors, yes, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. we're gonna try and pull together some overall thinking. There, I'm looking at you, Janine. You don't see me looking at you, but I'm looking at you.
here.
So we're gonna adjourn for lunch. Oh, Councillor Needbone.
I was just going to say, look, I'm on a broadly similar page to what Jen just said. I don't think we should be trying to give it back in terms of creating all these little spikes, and the way that we've been doing it to date, I think is probably the most practical way to deal with it. Yeah.
Especially given the additional rigor that has been asked through the Finance and Services Committee around how we forecast these amounts going forward. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So we will adjourn. It is 12:39. We'll adjourn the meeting for an hour. Can we come back 1:30? Can we come back at 1:30?
Yeah.
1:30. Thanks, everyone.